chicken tonight. Hey folks, well, it's been a week, now it's been 2 weeks actually, since the chicks have started coming here, and today just before I started the stream, I dropped some sunflower seeds in to see what would happen, and it doesn't look like anything much has happened. Well, they have attempted to eat the sunflower seeds, but mostly they're just picking them up and dropping them. This morning's chicken peep stream, we actually had a bit of a football game with the chickens, since I dropped 2 fat, juicy earthworms in the pen, and Chili Pepper found one of them and was promptly chased by the rest round and round the pen until a bunch of them got different little bits of earthworm. So I'm just gloving up right now so that we can prepare for our weekly chicken weigh-in. Igor, bring the scales and the box. Just gonna drop the scales right down here. And we'll get right to it. Just a moment, folks, while Igor brings the box. Yes. Bring the box. Oh, this is a bit small. Bring a bigger box, Igor. This is a bit shallow. They'll jump out of it. Bring a tall box, Igor. Yes, Igor. It's a terrible box, but it'll do. All right. Just zeroing out the weight and bring forth the instruments of recording, Igor. And now we'll start. So we'll start with Emily. And she's 277 grams, 279 grams. Look at it. That was Aurora, not Emily.
And that was
279 grams. Yeah, I'm just gonna... Oh. The chicks now need 2 hands to lift them because they're actually quite a lot larger than they were. Ugh. That's Emily, and she's 227 grams, and unhappy about being in the box. Summary bar is 285 grams. Come here, Chili. Chili pepper is 235 grams. We're getting some... They're actually attacking the scale at the moment, so it's a bit difficult to properly gauge their weight, but we'll try our best. Now, we're just going to grab Orb here. Orb is 230... Oh, get off there. 240 grams. Whoop. Here you go, coffee. Coffee is 272 grams. Who do we have left?
We have Ursula Vernon, we have Square, and Blue Velvet, Blue Diamond.
All right, let me just see. This is blue. This is Blue Diamond with the right wing, and Blue Diamond is 240. And here's Blue Velvet. Oops, someone's standing on the scale. Blue Velvet is 219 grams.
We are down to Square and Ursula Vernon.
Yep. Ursula Vernon. Let's see how much she weighs. Ursula is 236 grams. And now we finally come to our big boy Square, who is running around the cage like crazy. Shoo, shoo. Come here, Square. Oh, yeah. There's my big boy. And Square is a whopping 356 grams. There's my boy. So that's the weigh-in for this week. And we'll send Igor off to crunch the numbers while the chicks try to murder the weighing scale. We may have to do the weighing outside of the pen moving forward, since they actually really have started to get very aggressive these past few weeks. So, did you all get all those measurements? We just did the weekly chicken weigh-in. Oh dear, the camera's being attacked. Hang on a second. Sorry about this. The chicks have actually gotten a lot more aggressive, and they weigh a lot more than they used to, so they're actually starting to attack things. So, just gonna move you guys over so you can have a look at summary bar right here. Now, just moving the computer over so you can have a good look. Now, summary is actually... Oh, read out the measurements again, please. Igor, could you bring over the measurements? Thank you, Igor. So, the weights for the chicks. Blue Diamond is at 240 grams. Blue Velvet at 219. Emily at 227. Chili Pepper at 235. Aurora at 279. Orb at 240. Ursula Vernon at 236. Summary Bar at 285. Coffee at 272. And our Big Rooster Square is 356. Do you want me to repeat that? Okay. It's day 11 of the chicks being here, and blue diamond is 240 grams. Blue velvet is 219 grams. Emily is 227 grams. Chili pepper is 235 grams. Square is 356 grams. Aurora is 279 grams. Orb is 240 grams. Ursula Vernon is 236 grams. Summary bar is 285 grams. And coffee is 272 grams. Oop. So you can see that the chickens are actually flying now for real. They are taking little short hops and flights across the cage, and you can see they've actually almost got all of their wing feathers. Now I'm just going to move you over to the other side so we can have a look at what Summary Bar is doing right now. Oh, he got up. Now I'm just going to show you something that we've noticed with the chicks. So if I put my hand in, you'll see they start to, some of the chicks will actually start to try and challenge my hand by standing up tall and making themselves bigger. So Coffee here, come here Coffee. If I put my hand near Coffee or Chili Pepper, see how Coffee stands up real tall? And that's a challenging motion. See, Coffee wants to see whether he can fight me. However, now we'll just wait until Summary has finished drinking. Come here, Summary. Oh, you're still drinking. Now if I move Summary over, shoo shoo, shoo shoo. Now, Summary on the other hand, if I put my hand there, look, he's actually sitting down. He'll actually sit down like this. And that is actually a sign that Summary is submitting to me. So you can kind of see the different personalities of the chicks. Some chicks will try and challenge you. And here's, if I pat Square on the back, he doesn't like it. He'll actually stand up real tall and try and peck at my finger. But if I do pat, let me see, if I pat Summary, Summary will actually sit down. And that's Summary showing me that I'm in charge. Here you go, Summary, you're getting a little scritch. So Summary here is a submissive bird. Yep. He'll sit down. There we go. And Coffee here, Ursula here, is not. She won't sit down. So that's a difference between, you know, each bird has its own personality. And this is not because Summary is tired. Summary is actually showing me that, you know, they know that I'm stronger than them. Meanwhile, if you see, I poked Square in the back, and he immediately jumped up. He doesn't like it, and that's simply because Square is in charge of all the chickens in here and doesn't want to submit to my authority. We did have to speed up the weighing today because when I put the weighing machine into the cage, all of the chicks started pecking at it and trying to kill it. So it was a bit difficult for me to get the weights as accurately as I would like. But we can see that they've actually more than doubled their size by now. They're about 4 times the size they were when they moved in. Actually, more than 4 times the size. They were 40 grams when they came in, and now they're 300 grams, so they're almost 10 times the size they were when they first moved in here. It won't be very long before we actually have to move them out of the house into the chicken run, which will be arriving on Tuesday. So at the moment, we're still very carefully controlling the chicks' diet. And this morning, we started to... the chickens have not been outside every day. But in order to prepare them for going outside, today I actually prepared them what I can only describe as a grass smoothie. So I took about a couple handfuls of grass, stuck that in a blender, and then mixed some of their pellets in. Just give me a moment. What is it, Igor?
Estimated weight if they keep going this way. They'll be monsters.
Igor thinks that the chickens will be monsters at the rate they're growing. We've done a guess. He's done a little graph to guess where they're going to be at in 7 weeks, and apparently it will be 10 kilograms. But I suspect that Igor is a little overexcited about the weight gain. Here's Igor's graph right there. So, continuing on from where I was earlier, we're actually preparing the chicks for outside. So I made them a grass smoothie, and I also dropped 2 earthworms into their brooder today because I was only able to find 2 earthworms. And what happened was what can only be described as a very odd football game in which Chili Pepper discovered an earthworm and then started running around the cage, being chased by every other chicken inside. Yes, they were live worms. So suffice to say, I think we can conclude that worms are a popular dish with chickens, and we will be buying some mealworms tomorrow from the local pet store to give the chicks. Well, there was a bit of a tug of war between Chili Pepper and Blue Diamond, but eventually, I believe the worm was consumed in 3 parts. One by Chili, one by Blue Diamond, and while everyone was chasing Chili and Blue Diamond around for worm bits, Coffee found the second worm and ate it up whole. So we'll be buying some mealworms and crickets for the chicks tomorrow from the shop, and we'll see how they go. Uh, Only because I feel that I am an inadequate worm hunter and thus not able to provide the chicks with as many worms as they would like. We have dropped a few sunflower seeds inside the brooder, but it doesn't seem to be something that's popular with the chicks. They pick up the sunflower seeds and then immediately drop them. In terms of diet, the chicks have basically doubled their consumption of feed. So last week we were feeding the chicks at 20 grams per chick per day, and then this week we are feeding them at 40 grams per chick per day. And we expect that we expect an increase in their diet again next week. The chick feed that we give them does give the chickens a good solid protein mix, and sorry, there was a little bit of a challenge fight over there. The chick feed that we give them does give them a good solid protein mix, but it's still good to supplement with live feed, especially since they're going to be going outside into free range. So we need to get them to learn how to forage for food, and so the worms and the crickets will help them do that. Because once they're outside, they'll be moved to a slightly less nutritious feed with the assumption that they will be doing some foraging of their own. Oswell asks how I calculate the amount of feed I give the chicks, and the feed instructions were actually based on the average amount of feed that a meat chick would eat. And these were instructions that are actually fairly standard for meat chicks. So when the chicks arrive, they actually come, or they should come, with instructions from the breeder letting you know how much feed they should be eating. And you do need to control their feed very heavily because, as we've covered before, meat chicks don't have a level of satiation. Once they reach a certain point in their age, they actually don't know how to tell if they're full. So you need to, if you gave them unlimited feed, they would eat until they basically died or exploded or something terrible happened. It's also important to feed meat chicks on a meat chick or game bird formulated diet, and to make sure that they eat food that's appropriate for their age, because a lot of chicken feed has very high calcium levels, and this is because you need to supplement calcium for your egg layers. But when chicks are little, at this little age, especially in the first couple of weeks, they shouldn't have too much calcium in their diet because it actually will cause sort of bone deformations, and it's actually really bad for them. They'll get kidney stones as well, so you have to watch out for that. So make sure that when you feed your chicks when they're little, that they need to have like a protein rich feed that doesn't contain too much added calcium. So the average weight for the chicks today is 259 grams. Over the weekend, we will be taking the chicks out on little excursions outdoors. And once the run arrives on Tuesday, they'll actually spend a lot more time outside than in. So we'll be putting them outside during most of the daytime, assuming that their health is good, and the weather is nice and warm. No rain, like a sunshiny day with no rain, and not too much wind. We'll putting them outside on those days. And then as they feather out completely, we'll be leaving them outside once they've completely feathered out. Yep, that's correct. The average weight that Eleanor has come up with is correct. So the chicks have been fighting each other a lot more lately, and they've been working out their pecking order. So far, I've noticed that there are a couple of chicks at the bottom of the rung. One of them is Summary Bar, who will pretty much squat down for anyone who vaguely looks in his direction. And the other is Blue Velvet. Square, being the biggest chicken in the cage, is still the undisputed king of the cage. And the secondary leader of the chicks is now no longer Aurora, but Chili Pepper. Although I believe that there have been a couple scuffles in the cage lately between Chili Pepper, Aurora, and Ursula Vernon, so it remains to be seen who will actually come out second square. There is some capacity in the chicks' diet, like we do calculate and carefully manage their feed, but there is some capacity for them to have a few treats, chicken scratch, and obviously when they go outside they'll have their own foraging for live food, as well as eating some of the grasses that is outside. So to be honest, the feed that we give them is not a complete. Once they move outside, we will be switching to a feed that is not a complete diet. We will still be feeding them in accordance to the instructions given by the breeder, but those instructions also take into account things like treats and live food. Now, the good thing I've heard about chickens is that they will, in fact, eat all of the ants and cockroaches in the garden, so that will at least be a load off my mind. The chicks have actually already started to, when they went out on their first journey outside, they were actually quite capable of digging up, well, they dug up half an ant nest and ate about a whole pile of ants. So that's always a good thing. Ants are always a perennial problem in my garden. I'm going to pick up one of the chicks and give you a look at their legs, because one of the things that's happened so recently is that they've really gained a lot of muscle in their feet. And that, of course, is for them to scratch around in dirt and hunt for their food. But let me see if I can pull up one of the chicks and show off their really huge legs. Come here. Let's stretch out your legs for me. And you can see those really big limbs. And they've got really quite strong little feet there. Their thigh muscles are also very well developed. So they have gotten into a hobby of scratching up the sawdust at the bottom of the cage, but they've gotten so strong that they've managed to scratch it out the top of the cage, even with the cage lid shut. They're throwing sawdust pretty much all over the house. So I have to say that the outdoor chicken run cannot come too soon. So I think that's all the news I have about the chicks. I'm just going to move you over next to the water tank because I need to fill the water tank. The chicks now drink about a half tank every 12 hours. And if they don't, sorry, let me just fiddle with this. If they don't get their water, or if the tanks either of water or feed run out, they're actually strong enough to overturn the empty pipes. So I actually have to keep the tanks for feed and water filled in order to prevent it from being overturned all over the place. So I will be right back. There we go. Let's just pour that water in. And cover the lid. I'm not having you knock it down again. Okay. Also has a really good question about the chicks' life cycle, or rather the life cycle of these meat chicks. Now, we know that these meat chicks here will actually grow to full size in 8 weeks, which is long before they reach maturity. Most chickens will reach maturity at about 6 months of age. So these chicks will not actually reach their age of majority, so to speak. So how do we get more meat chicks? Now, that's actually a really complicated and really simple question. It has entirely to do with the genetics of the Cornish cross. So what happens is you start with the grandfather, well, the creation of meat chicks starts actually all the way back about 3 generations. So you start with a great grandma and a great grandpa chicken, usually what they call a Plymouth Rock or a rather large breed, similar large breed, Plymouth Rock, Jersey Giant, and then you cross that with what they call the Cornish game hen or Cornish game rooster. You would also need to have a Plymouth Rock chicken and probably another Barred Rock. So you'd have two separate, two pairs of great great grandma and great great grandma chickens. So from that point on, you then have your grandparent chickens, because obviously you're breeding them across. And the farmers will then select for the fastest growing of those, with big chests and big legs and whatever else you need. And then you end up with another couple clutches of eggs, which will be the parent birds. And once again, from the parent birds, they select the fastest growing with the biggest chests and the biggest legs, etc., etc. So what you're actually seeing here would be the great-great-grandchildren of the original purebred chickens. So these chicks will not reproduce, but their parents will, and their parents will reproduce multiple times. So really what you're ending up with is that these great-great-grandchildren will not breed any further, but their parents will. It's a little bit complicated, and there's a lot more weird genetics that go into chickens. But yes, you would. The parents of these chicks are not necessarily normal chickens. They are fast-growing, slightly bigger chickens, but they will still be able to reach that age of majority. Once you get past that level, you won't have normal chickens after that. Now, parent chickens of the meat chicks do not actually have a full lifespan. They will not live for their full lifespan because they will be used basically to produce the eggs that these chicks come from, but also because they are also an accelerated speed in terms of the amount of fat and meat they put on. It's the same kind of problems you'd find in someone who is terribly obese. They won't live as long as somebody who is actually keeping slim and healthy. But no, they won't be sickly chickens past 8 weeks. They will actually live possibly about a year to 2 years. Now, don't take my word for it. If you are interested in finding out about how meat chickens are made, you should do some research into breeding Cornish cross. And that should give you a lot of information on how Cornish cross chickens are made. I'm going to see if I can find... A year or 2 years is a very short lifespan for a chicken. I believe that some heritage breeds can live up to 6 years. But I'm just going to see if I can find the original website where I found out how Cornish cross chickens were bred. There you go. I have just sent through the chicken.org.au's information on chicken meat production. Now, every breeder of Cornish cross chickens will have their own secret sauce, their own secrets as to how what breeds of chicken they include in the mix, and when they breed them and what they look for. So each farmer will have their own secret recipe. Australia actually has very stringent rules in terms of chicken slaughter. So the hanging line that you mentioned, that Alswell is mentioning, and this is a story that Alswell is mentioning about how chickens are slaughtered, the executioner's line would not be allowed in Australia. Most chickens would be slaughtered here by having their heads cut off, and usually with a killing cone to prevent blood spatter on the actual body of the chicken. So it's a very quick and humane method of dispatching the chickens. Yeah. Yeah, the chicks will be put into a killing cone, and then, which is sort of like a, no, the electrified water method is not used in Australia as far as I know. I'll just check with Igor on that one. Igor, chicken slaughter, do they use the electrified water method?
No.
No, it's not allowed, is it?
No.
No. Yeah. Chickens are, we're not allowed to use the electrified water method because it has been deemed inhumane. So chickens are slaughtered by basically the killing cone method, or in factory settings they would just have the hip taken off. There are a number of methods, including the broomstick method, which is rather weird. From what I can see, I've just done a little bit of research into the slaughter methods of chickens in Australia, and it looks like that some areas actually use a argon or nitrogen um, atmospheric thing to knock out the chickens before they dispatch if they're doing it in a factory setting. But electrification in water is not allowed. They do have halal slaughter methods in Australia, but I think you have to go to a specifically halal processing plant to get those done. we'll be taking these chicks up to Redgate Farm, and Redgate is more or less a two-person operation. So while they do have a slaughterhouse license, um, the chicks will actually be done one-on-one. So the law in Australia when it comes to the slaughter of any animal is that they are not allowed to cause the animal any undue harm. So specifically, the rules are that I'm just pulling up the actual law. Minimization of the risk of injury, pain, and suffering, and the least practical disturbance to the animals is what's required of any processing facility. And of course, they need to be hygienic. So I'm just going to leave you guys with the chicks for the next couple of minutes while I go off to do some of my chores. But yeah, everything is going quite swimmingly here in the Ragnar Rookery. The chicks are growing at a good clip, and we'll see about blowing up Igor's insane diagram so that you can see Igor's plans. Now, chickens may not be the smartest animals around, but they are actually a flock animal, so they will actually move together or stay together in a group because there's safety in numbers. A friend of mine described chickens as basically the world's McDonald's burger in that They are very vulnerable to predation, and they can be they are predated on by pretty much any wild animal out there. So cats, raccoons, rats, snakes, any of these animals would happily eat a chicken in a heartbeat. So chickens will move in a group, and that's just a simple safety instinct. Now, if you really want to get to a poultry animal that does move completely in unison, you should check out turkeys, because apparently all the turkeys I've observed, at least, that live in flocks, they tend to hang out in groups of 3 and move as one, like as if it is a single giant turkey with 3 heads. They'll also vocalize as one, which is kind of disturbing. Calm down, Aurora. None of that now. One other thing to note about chickens is that despite being nature's hamburger and basically being predated on by every animal, a chicken will eat pretty much any meat it can get its beak around. So they will quite happily, and they are like quite aggressive predators. So they will chase after and consume, well, once they're bigger, uh, any rats, mice, snakes, spiders, as long as it can fit in a chicken's beak or be broken up into enough pieces to fit down a chicken's throat, the chicken will actually attempt to eat it. So they will eat lizards, snakes, cockroaches, anything that they can fit their beak around. Hollandia 93 asks about when the chicks went out for their day out. When we took the chicks out a few days ago, whoo! Chili, calm down. Oh, you silly, silly thing. Don't you attack me. None of you attack me. Bad, bad. We did actually sit by the pen and watch over them to make sure that nothing bad happened to them. But they kept in a group and they followed us around and around the pen, which is actually kind of adorable. One thing I am finding quite amusing about these chicks is that they are growing their feathers so rapidly that we haven't seen any bald spots. Usually, between the time that they start getting their feathers and the time that they finish feathering, they start losing their little yellow fuzz and they get bald spots and they kind of look a bit ugly. But these chicks seem to be just growing out quite nicely. And they seem to be retaining their little chick fluff, which is kind of cute. Well, anyway, it's about time for me to sign off. It's getting late, and we do need to put these chickens to bed. So, from all of us here at the Ragnar Rookery, we hope you have a nice day, and do take care of yourselves. Wash your hands, and stay at home, folks. Bye bye.